Today on Legacy Leavers, I'm honored to sit down with a leader whose life has been defined by service, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to community, Akayo Abdul-Samad. Akayo is a lifelong resident of Des Moines and one of the most impactful voices in our state's recent history. He served in the Iowa House of Representatives for nearly 2 decades, representing Des Moines and advocating for equity, justice, and opportunity for all Iowans. But his leadership began long before being elected for office. In the 1960s, Akayo was part of the movement for civil rights and social justice, including his time as a leader in the Black Panther Party here in Des Moines. That early commitment to justice evolved into a lifetime of service. Akayo founded Creative Visions, an organization still serving Des Moines and dedicated to supporting at-risk youth and helping them build paths towards stability and success. Akayo also served on the Des Moines School Board and has been a consistent advocate for our youth, families, and underserved communities across our community and state. What makes Akayo's story especially powerful is that it's not only shaped by leadership, but by personal loss, faith, and a deep belief in the potential of every human being. Join me in soaking in the story of Akayo Abdul-Samad. Well, Akayo Abdul-Samad, thank you so much for saying yes and joining me on Legacy Leavers. I've really been looking forward to this conversation.
No, thank you I'm the one that's honored.
Yeah, good.
To be here.
We've known each other a long time. I've been at the Community Foundation now 24 years, and I first met you, I think, through that work when you were meeting with our then president, Johnny Danos, about some of the work you were doing at Creative
Correct.
Visions. And so it's just been an honor to know you for that long and watch you with admiration in this community. So I'm really excited about the conversation. You grew up in Des Moines. You are a Des Moines guy.
I did. I grew up here, but I left for a while because I didn't want to get Iowa-itis.
There you go. And we will talk about that because I'm curious about some stories there. But tell me about growing up in Des Moines and what your family looked like. I don't know about your siblings or kind of where you lived.
Well, it's actually, a little sad and good. But anyway, my sibling that's alive now is my sister, Stephanie, who is my rock.
Oh.
And has became more my rock since our mother passed.
Okay.
In fact, she's my younger sister, but you can't tell her that. She is my older sister.
Okay.
But
is she in Des Moines too?
She is in Des Moines.
Oh, that's a blessing. Yeah, good.
She is. But Des Moines was an experience for me, because the point is I grew up a kid that, actually was bullied and was made fun of. But I had a chance to grow up when Center Street, was at its peak. When Center Street was in that area, which is now Sherman Hill. That was a stable within the African-American community.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit, because I think it's important that those listening to this know kind of what happened in Center Street and how things changed over time.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, they called it, of course, urban renewal. I call it urban removal, because they uprooted, the businesses in that area. But
primarily Black businesses.
All of them were.
Yeah.
All of them were Black, from the beauty salon, beauty school, to the Y, to, we had places to go, to the nightclubs, the bakeries, it was there. And on Friday and Saturday night, as a child, we would sneak down further on Center Street, and we would watch individuals come in, and they would have the Cadillacs are there, the nice suits, and folk would dress. But you also saw those individuals in church on that Sunday. So you knew people. We had a neighborhood.
100%.
And a total neighborhood.
And then what happened, and how old were you when you saw some changes happen there?
I'm going on probably about 10 or so, and a little older.
And all of a sudden,
it's gone. and
because
the freeway.
the freeway went through.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for folks to understand when we talk about redlining. And actually, there have been displays and demonstrations and information in Des Moines to talk about that and help our community know more about what happened and sort of what became a divide in the community. And you saw it happen.
Exactly. And watched it and, didn't comprehend what was really happening at that time, because we have to understand that around the corner from where I grew up, Judge Glantown, God rest his soul, and Willie Stevenson Glenn lived around the corner. And so we had our teachers and, you had
community
other icons in the community.
Yeah.
I knew, Mrs. Florence down the street of that. We knew everybody. And all of a sudden you wake up one morning and we're moving, but that's gone. That whole
and
community
then it
is
became
gone.
more scattered.
Totally scattered.
Right.
And even though individuals try to recreate that on university, it never took hold because the finances were never there. And you're talking about a removal of a very strong, vibrant community that was there one morning and then gone the next to put in a freeway, But then as I got older, of course, and I got more involved, politically involved, I found out this was done in major cities.
Yes, it happened around the nation.
Country.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're still recovering.
And still recovering.
That's it.
And that's a sad commentary, because that alone should have us looking at funding. That alone should have us look at recreating neighborhoods, because with that is the reason why we have creative visions not this day, years later, decades later, because we created, basically a vacuum. So there was no longer young people like me that grew up seeing individuals that were our goal models, that we knew.
Okay, did you have to change schools at that point in time when you moved?
I was changed several schools at that time. The school elementary school that I went to was Byrd, and then I got moved to Grant, and then my middle school, I went to Callahan, and they got changed to Washington Irving.
Okay.
So it was
That's
always
a lot of transition.
For any young person.
Yeah.
And there were several of us that had to go through that transition. And when I started at Callahan, they then informed my mother I wasn't in the, district, to be able to go to Callahan. So, it was no discussion, uprooted me, go to Washington Irving, and Washington Irving was a predominantly, poor school, and that's where we went.
You talked about your mom. Was your dad in your family as well?
My dad, and that's the sad part on my other siblings. I think I saw my father about 4 times, in my life.
Yeah.
And each time was not a good relationship.
All the more, maybe that leads into sort of your passion for making sure there are male role models for people, young youth as well, because you maybe didn't have that.
Correct. Because the thing is, we really don't understand the trauma that children go through, but internalize it and never deal with it. So as they get older, that trauma begins to be triggered and they don't even know where it came from.
Yeah. Yeah.
My trauma, with the relationship with my father, when I found out he had 2 other children, and it was by accident. And I happened to see him going into this apartment, and in Oak Ridge, and I went over there, knocked on the door, because I knew it was my father, and I walked in. His wife at that time invited me in, and he brought my siblings downstairs, and he said, "This is my daughter, and this is my son." And then when he introduced me, he said, "This is a Akeo."
Oh, okay.
So he didn't claim me or introduce me or give me, my value in the situation. So that's something that's set in me. So even though I tried to build that relationship with my siblings, it was hard for me to do that because when I looked at them, I saw my father.
Right.
So, but I didn't know all that was going on with
Sure.
me at that time and now I missed the opportunity because my brother drowned it, pledging to a fraternity,
Oh.
and he couldn't swim. He was the only one pledging that could not swim, and they took the boat out and turned the boat over in the
Oh, I'm
water.
sorry.
And he's the only one that didn't make it back.
Yeah.
Then my sister died, and she died. She was, dying, and she had her leg amputated and that type of thing. And then I had a nephew who was killed that we couldn't connect enough for
To
me
create family.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that I regret.
Tell me more about your mom and what she did to help make ends meet and raise this family primarily as a single mom. Is that correct?
Totally correct.
Yeah.
My mother made me the best diaper changer, that this city has ever seen.
Did she bring children into her home to care for?
My sister. When my sister was born, my mother had to sneak out at night to go to work.
Oh, wow.
Because she was on welfare. Because during the day, the welfare worker would try to catch her. And at that time would knock on the door.
Yeah.
And say, "Are you home?" And just come and check the house and everything. And my mother.
So you were in charge at night?
At night, I had to take care of my baby sister. I had to change the diaper and do different things. I grew up, but I also became a mother's boy, a mama's boy. And I tell everybody to this day, I was a mama's boy.
Yeah, no shame in that.
Yeah, that was she
I
raised
love that.
me.
That's great.
And the thing is, my mother spent the last 45 days in my home because she died of cancer, stage 4 cancer. And she wouldn't move to my house. For years, I tried to get her to move with me. We had 45 days of real conversation. The best time.
Yeah, I'm
my
glad
mother
you
and I
had that.
And she died in my arms,
Oh.
struggling. But the key with that was a conversation, because I asked Mom, I'm sitting there talking to her, and I said, "Mom, how come you weren't my friend?" And she said, "I'm your parent. I wasn't supposed to be your friend."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, other parents, talk about being friends." And my mother had a key phrase. When she made a point, and I pushed that point, or my sister did, her key phrase was, "You want me to slap you?"
There you go.
That's when
so
you
here
know
she is.
the conversation was over.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
This is it. She never did, but the point is, she said it with such, authority.
It's like, I'm not
going to test it. So, but she was the rock for my sister and I. She kept us going. And even when I was in middle school, my counselor called me into the office and told me that I wasn't intelligent enough to go to high school and don't even think about college, and he had a friend that worked at Armstrong Tire and Rubber at that time and at the register, and he was going to help me get a job there. You understand? I'm in middle school. This is an adult telling me that
you didn't have it.
I didn't have it and I couldn't make it. And so because of that male conditioning that men have, unfortunately, I didn't cry there. I wanted to, but I held it till I was going home. And then when I got home and my mom was, fixing dinner and I was trying to hold back the tears, she saw him, she looked, said, "What's wrong?" And I explained to her what happened, And she said, "We'll talk about it." But, we had dinner and everything. So after dinner, she just looked at me. She said, "Never let someone define you." She said, "You listen to everybody. You take what is good, but don't let them define you."
Absolutely not.
And I've lived with that all my life, because that was when she did her famous statement, because I said, "But Mom," and she said, "You want me to slap you?"
Yeah, you remember those words.
Yeah, so the conversation was over.
Yeah. We've, as we've had other conversations, that's so unfortunate, because I've heard from many of the people that I've interviewed, a teacher made the difference in terms of inspiring them.
Correct.
Or giving them the confidence that they could go on. Or really, it was like the light that went on, that somebody believes in me, which is so important to youth, which I think you have provided for so many youth in this community, belief and hope and that they can do it. And so maybe that some of that spirit came from that experience with you.
It did. All of it comes from my experiences.
Yeah.
In growing up.
So talk to me a little bit You were growing up also in the 60s, right? When a
Correct.
lot of social
Correct.
change and unrest was happening. You got very active and very engaged at a young age. I want to hear more about where that spark came from and how you then sort of started putting your foot in the door of getting more activated in the community.
Well, again, Chrissy, what we talk about is that all of it comes from my pain. It really does.
But you
And,
could have shut down.
and everything. Exactly. But if it wasn't for my mother, I probably would have. When I got into high school, I said I gotta find something that's going to catapult me,
Yeah.
with my self-esteem to help me build.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about getting involved with the struggle or anything else at that time. So I went out for football, and I was too skinny for football. In fact, when I put on my football uniform, it looked like my head was a little peanut sitting in all this, and that's what it was. And then the first time I got hit, I couldn't get off the ground.
Yeah. So there went that.
There it went. So then I went out for basketball, and I tell people the myth: every black person cannot dribble.
Well, there you go.
Dribble, yeah, couldn't do it. But I did have a skill because, see, when you're bullied in school, you learn how to run, and you learn how to run fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my talent. And I went up for cross country,
Oh, good.
and I led it in cross country. And I said, this is it. And I said, I can get scholarships, go to school, get a house for my mom. I'm going to college.
You
get a house.
saw a pathway.
Exactly. And that was it.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, at the 60s, you
Yeah.
had Malcolm X, you had Martin
Right.
Luther King, So I'm reading because I love to read, did great, so I'm reading and I'm seeing all this. So Charles Claiborne, and E.C. Smith came to me and said, Akale, we want to start a Black Student Union. It was organizing the Black students, but I had a caveat. I said, listen, if we organize the Black students, we need some white students who believe the way we do, and they need to start a white student union so that we're doing this.
I like that.
And we did, and we started. Now, and this is because my lessons, what I'm saying, because I learned a long time ago as I watched, you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah.
I grew up in a neighborhood.
Well, that's
you can't do
crossing
it.
the aisles, right?
Exactly.
Which you then had to
Which has been all my life
navigate
now.
100%.
Exactly.
So you became very engaged in the Black Panther movement.
I did.
Here in Des Moines, as it was starting out.
It was just starting out, which people don't understand. I was really leery of the Black Panthers when at first because the media, traditional media, and what, because I'm saying we're not going to pick no guns and be shooting in our community.
Right.
We're not going to do that.
Right.
But when I met the Deputy Minister of Defense and I met the individual, Miriam, who brought it here from California, and we talked about setting up a free breakfast program, a free clothing store. That was right up my alley.
Sure.
So
Still
I
is.
then became lieutenant of the Black Panther Party.
At age?
17.
What did your mom think of that?
She was scared to death. And she was the reason why I ended up leaving Des Moines later, because of her fear for my life. Because the thing is,
It became associated, when people saw you, they saw that. They saw the movement.
Well, not only that, people supported us, and they were there.
Yeah.
But the system didn't, because there was this, what was going on in California, what was going on in other larger cities.
Yeah.
They said, well, the Panthers here. And they deemed us to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And that even got us blowing up. So I almost died, and because the Panther headquarters was right on 11th Street.
11th and?
University.
Okay.
Right off of University, where Corinthian Gardens is at now. All right. And so we were there. And the thing is, we were late for class, for political education class, because the Deputy Minister of Education didn't get the paper done. So we were there. So most of the Panthers left. There were 6 of us left in the house.
Okay.
And we were watching TV when right outside the classroom. If class had been on time, we would not have an interview today.
So something came through.
Somebody planted C4 and dynamite on the Panther headquarters. It blew out the whole back of the Panther headquarters and the classroom, damaged about 34 houses in the community. you can see, so every day, I'm being shaped
Yes.
to do this
With
work.
your life
With
experiences.
my life experience.
So let's transition to your experience leaving Des Moines.
Yes.
And you mentioned that your mom was a little bit of a force in that, in terms of just concerned about your safety and moving on. And talk about what you moved to.
Okay. Well, I came home, and I walked in the house, and my mother was sitting there, and it's the first time I saw my mother doing crocodile tears, just streaming down. See, my mother rode the bus all the time, and she was always told that I was going to die. Somebody always came and said, your son's not going to live. He's not even going to see 21. And that's hard for a mother.
Oh, yeah.
And so
And then it
whoever
very
talked to
real.
her, whoever talked to her that day, hit home or something, because I walked in, she was just crying, and she looked at me, she said, I don't want to lose you. And I said, what can I do? She said, I want you to leave Des Moines. I said, I'm gone. I said, I'm not going to hurt you. So I got in my car. I got a friend who was crazy enough to go with me, and that next morning I was on the highway heading for Denver, and, some things transpired and I went to sleep. He got lost. And when I woke up, I was looking around. I said, where are we? He said, I don't know, but I didn't want to wake you up. He said, I don't know where we're at. And I said, oh my God, and looked up. So at that time.
This is such a different time too. It's not like you just pulled it up on your phone.
No. You had a map. Yeah. You had a map that you had to read.
I held it upside down.
And if you didn't know how to read the map and all the blue lines and red lines, you was in trouble.
And in the middle of the night, it's not good.
So end up, I saw the Tulsa, Oklahoma sign, so we were totally away from Denver, the opposite direction. Yeah. So I said, well, let's keep going.
Let's keep going south.
Yeah. So kept on going and ended up in Memphis and ended up getting a place to stay in West Memphis, Arkansas, which was like West Des Moines and Des Moines.
Okay.
And that's where I ended up first getting the job and that type of thing. And we stayed in the slave quarters.
Oh, wow.
At an old hotel.
Okay.
And the owner let us stay there. And the owner came to us one day and said, you boys look like you're strong enough. You should go work on a towboat.
Yeah.
I said, okay, now I'm from Iowa. I don't know the difference between a towboat, riverboat, nothing.
Right.
So every night we would go down by the river and wait for these boats to come. So one night the boat comes and the guy sticks his head out and said, y'all want a job? We said, yeah, because a towboat, you get $1,000,
Oh, yeah.
Every 30 days, you get 30 days off. You still get your $1,000. That was good money back then.
Right. So what was the work?
Well, we thought we were getting on a towboat. We ended up getting on a riverboat.
Okay.
And getting on a riverboat, we were washing dishes. We were pots and pan. And I said, well, if they want to pay me $1,000 a month to wash pots and pan, I can do that. I still don't know the difference. So when we got our first check, my check was like $99, And I said, this ain't going to get to $1,000. I said, we can't. So I went up to the person's office and I go to I said, do y'all hold back a week? Is that why my
what's
check?
going?
Yeah, this check ain't right. And he looked at me and said, no, you're getting what a dishwasher makes. I said, well, I want to get what the other people get on the towboat, because how do I get to it? He said, you ain't on no towboat. You're on a riverboat. We have passengers, And then he pointed to me and said, that's a towboat. And I went down there. I said, man, we've been hoodwinked and bamboozled, So I ended up staying on a riverboat, though, for 4 years of my life. And it was the best 4 years I ever had.
Yeah, talk about it. What was it like?
Well, I got to meet
you eventually weren't washing dishes anymore.
No, I ended up becoming the maitre d'.
Yes, imagine that.
And I ended up helping open up the Mississippi Queen, their new dining room.
Okay.
And they did a piece in the black newspaper here at that time. And I was on the riverboat having fun. We went from from New Orleans all the way to St. Paul, up and down the different river, different stops, every place. I got to see different places, meet different people. I got to meet people with money, people who thought they had money, people who had new money, and I was able to learn the difference.
Yes, that's really interesting. Because they had to have some wealth to be doing this riverboat thing, right?
Oh, it was awesome. I learned about people and how they treat you with money that have money,
Yeah.
you know. And I learned to be able to communicate with different individuals, no matter what level that they were on. And the maitre d' at that time, who basically took me under his wing, you know, helped school me on a lot of things about life. Because you remember, I didn't have a father.
Right.
So, but he did. I cherish that to this day,
Yeah.
you know, because he
A
did.
mentor.
And he
Yeah.
looked at me, you know, he said, what have you learned out of all this? I said, I've learned that I want your job. You know, I said, you wear a suit every day. On the captain's dinner night, the last night, you wear a tuxedo. You know,
Did you get to do that then
I
when you
did
were
get to
maitre
do
d'?
that.
Yeah.
And we went. He showed me the suits to buy and that type of thing. And so, I mean, it's the first time I ever had, you know, hand woven suits and the ties and tailor. I mean, because that's how you had to dress. So when he took vacation, I became the maitre d', and I was on the boat. And we were going from Minnesota to St. Louis, and the Secret Service came and escorted me off the boat because Lady Bird Johnson was riding the boat, and I didn't pass the Secret Service test. And how ironic that is, because now
Is that because of your past engagement?
with the Panther Party
Okay.
and that type of thing, because the Panther Party in Des Moines actually hit President Nixon's desk. J. Edgar Hoover actually declared us a very dangerous party,
Oh, interesting.
because they couldn't infiltrate the core group. And the thing is, we never picked up a gun. We fed kids, get clothing. We helped deal with drugs in our community. Never did like other chapters had to, and what they did, we never did. But we were considered dangerous. So I sat in my hotel in Minnesota, flew to St. Louis, waiting to get back on the boat. But between that 2-week period, a lot of thinking, and I'm saying, if people aren't going to let me forget my past, then what is my commitment?
At that point, did you decide to come back home?
I decided to come back home, and I was glad I did.
Yeah.
Because I had a son who was born, who later was shot to death.
Yeah. I want to hear
So,
more about that,
yeah.
Akeo, because that was such a tragic and defining moment for you. And I've heard you talk about it before a bit. I know that it's such a hard topic, but it also, I think, inspired you to continue the work that you were doing. Are you willing to share a little more about that?
It made me question everything I was about, because I started Creative Visions in 96,
Yes.
and
what
he
year
was
did this
killed 97.
Okay.
But what led up to that is that Christmas, we would always get together around Christmas, and because his birthday was the 14th. So we all get together, and he was at my house, and we were sitting there. He was sitting on the couch, and I was looking at him up from the floor. And he looked at me, he said, "Pops, I'm not going to live to see my next birthday." And I looked at him, and at that time, he raised up his shirt and pulled out a gun and set it on the couch. And at that time, I said, do I talk about the gun or do I talk about a statement? And I'm going through this mental gymnastics right now, So we talked about a statement. And he explained to me that he was involved with the Black Gangster Disciples, and we were talking about his gang affiliation and everything. He said, I'm just trying to do what you're trying to do, but on this other side of the fence. And we talked about housing and everything else. And he was leading the conversation. He taught me how to talk with young people and not at them. That stayed with me no matter what. But as the year went, I wouldn't think, about, his birthday was coming up. We were there. He called me December 8th and said, "Pops, I want to come work for you." And, of course, my ego got big. I said, this is my legacy. He's going to take over, go with that. So I said on the 10th, come on, we'll do the paperwork and everything. I'm sitting outside waiting there for him on the 10th to come. A car pulls up and looks at me and said, "You need to get to the hospital." And I looked at him.
Did you have any idea?
As a parent, something's terribly wrong. And when they told me little Kay was in the hospital, I said, he's dead, to myself. I didn't want it to happen, but I felt
You knew it, yeah.
So I waited a couple of minutes. I went to the hospital. I got the young people all through Broad Longs in the hospital. And the doctors came out and said, "Oh, we're glad you're here. You can help us with the young people." And when the young people said, "That's little O'Kale's dad." And so the doctor said, "Oh, you
Because
need to come."
because I mean, in our community, you're known as the person to call to help the young people.
Exactly.
And so they made the
Exactly.
assumption that you would be there,
Exactly.
not realizing that that was your son, that you were grieving.
Exactly. So, they said, "Come with us. We have a room." We go. I said, "No, take me to my baby." And I had to say that several times, and finally I had to look at the doctor and say, "You see all these young people?" I said, "You don't want to anger me, because if they see that I get angry,
Yeah.
I will have no control." So it's the longest walk I have ever taken in my life, even to this day. And I walked to the corridor, went through those steel doors, and there my son laid on the gurney with a hole in his chest.
I'm so sorry, Akeo.
And from that point, it just, I can't even tell you what I was thinking. I know I talked to him, I kissed him on his forehead. They informed me his mother came. I got her in the room and talked and told her little Kay was dead. And she, and got her there. I left because the young people were still there, and I went out to get some air, and the young man was sitting in the police car, and I knew he knew my son. And I went to the police, and I said, "Can I talk to him?" And they said, "Yeah." They opened the door. I got in the car, and he looked at me. He said, "Baby Kale, how's little Kale?" I said, "Little Kale's dead." And, he looked at me, and he reached out to hug me, and I reached out to hug him. And just as our hands touched each other's shoulder, he said, "I didn't mean to kill him." And at that time, I mean, you're talking about some rubber legs, you're talking about a head. I didn't know
It's
what to
almost
do.
like an out-of-body experience,
Totally.
not knowing what to do in that
Totally.
moment.
Totally. And so the policeman knocked on the window, and that's what brought me back to reality. And I got out, and I just wanted to leave at that point. But then some administrators came and said, "Okay, we can't control the young people." So I walked back in, and I said, "Listen, simple. Take Akeo down to the viewing. I need to let him know he's dead." And we did. They prayed it. We went there. They viewed his body that night. And the only thing that happened, brought a window got broke, but other than that, that was it. Everybody went home, and then from that point on, it was just.
I mean, you held such responsibility that maybe you didn't want, but you had it because they all looked to you as this role model and how you were going to respond. So it became an opportunity for you to be a light during that time.
So 6:00 in the morning, I'm getting ready to go into the office because I know that's where the young people are going to be.
Yeah.
So that's what I prepared to do.
Yeah.
So my grieving didn't happen until 2 years later. And that,
You were just kind of like head down, get back into work,
Exactly.
get back into.
Exactly. Because I didn't want to see nobody else get hurt.
I was going to ask you a little more about the just formation of creative visions. It was really putting structure to a lot of the things that you were already doing or that you had done in your past.
Exactly.
And so that was in about 1995.
96.
96 that you formed Creative Visions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, and
still engaged.
Still engaged, we're 30 years this year.
Yeah.
And unfortunately still struggling, to keep the doors open. But
Right.
a lot of people are struggling. But we never could grab, Chris, that niche, because when we sold no Creative Visions, there was shooting taking place, drugs were happening. And when we were able to reduce that considerably, then people said, "Oh, we're safe now." So then people think, "Well, no, I don't have to give money
Job's
here
done.
anymore."
Yeah.
We move on. We try to tell them this is generational. Let's give them. We were at a point that we could have made a serious impact in this city, and I guarantee you, if we had it then and follow what we were talking about and stayed on that path, we wouldn't have the violence we have today. I can guarantee that.
Talk about moving from this nonprofit leadership, which you continued, but then engaging in public service through an elected role. How did you make the decision to transition or add that to your the body of work that you were embracing?
Yeah.
What inspired you to run for office?
I really don't know, other than fact of being late for a meeting, and I say that because at the time we had a group that was meeting every Saturday morning, and we did for 5 years. And at one point, they wanted to run someone for the school board. And so we were sitting at there trying to find a candidate and everything. And one of the meetings, I said, if we can't find somebody to run, I'll run. And just playing. I was late for 2 meetings, and each meeting. But the last meeting I was late for, I was sitting there, and we're sitting around the table, and they're saying, well, we don't know if he can win, but, we'll do the best support we can. And, there's some things. And I'm sitting there, I'm agreeing. I'm chiming in with the choir. Then I finally said, well, who's the candidate? They said, you are.
Oh my God.
And I said, no, I'm not.
But you did it.
Yeah. I said, okay, I'll do it. But the key with that, and I want to let people know, no one thought I could win.
And what year was the school board?
This is 2003.
Okay.
And no one thought I could win, because 3 reasons. 1, the Panther. 2, Muslim. 3, being Black.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, at that time, you ran for the whole city. We weren't in wards at that time.
Okay.
So I'm knocking on every door throughout this city. And honestly, people don't understand. I covered the city twice. And the night that the results were coming in, my mom was right there. She said, do 2 speeches. Write one if you win. Write another one if you lose. And she said, don't be angry if you lose.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm not angry, because what I did, I was really proud of, because even though people were telling me I wasn't going to win, just get the issues out, my goal was to win. And they said I was running a PTA mother and the president of the school board at that time. And Chrissy, it was, I won, and I never wrote the 2 speeches.
Well, and that sort of opened a whole new door for you.
Total.
Because eventually you ran and won and served in the Iowa House of Representatives for
18 years.
18 years.
18
You weren't
years.
doing both at the same time, were you, at any point?
No.
Okay.
And understand that at that time, when I ran for the state house, everybody was saying, ain't no sense in running against him, let's do that. But in 2007, same time, we had the seed sex scandal. And I was on the board.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was on the board. And so next thing you know, I have 4 other opponents running against me because they knew I couldn't win because of C-Tech. And during that time, Chrissy, they were saying he's going to the penitentiary, he was on the board, and I became the centerfold, for one reporter. And he just stayed on me, and I had news cameras at my front door and different things. But, I was learning, but I kept the high road. I didn't succumb because I didn't do anything wrong,
Yeah.
And when it all came down, it was proven. And even when all the negative were going, they did a retraction. It was about this small by the obituary column. I learned a lot.
I bet.
From that, and I had to be stood fast, but I also had to make sure it didn't change me, that it didn't anger me, that I didn't
Take the high road.
internalize,
Yeah.
some misgivings on some people.
Yeah, that's
because,
tough.
I mean, it was nasty.
Yeah, that's
It
tough.
was nasty, and I went through that for almost 3 months, every morning, every day.
Yeah, I bet.
And it was rough. But when I won, even the primary, one of the individuals even changed over and became an independent so he could run against me in the general.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I did win.
So talk about serving in the Iowa House a bit. I mean, you represent so many things that many of the legislators have barely had exposure to, in my opinion, probably in that time. And still from your early, we talked about crossing the aisle a bit, learning to, find common ground, things like that. What was your kind of philosophy there? What was your strategy to make change?
Was to be me. I loved going in there. When I first was elected, man, it was like going to school. It was like going to college, because everywhere I went in there, the building, the beauty of it, the history in
Yes.
it, and what my charge was, and I had to hit a learning curve. And it was,
It is.
yeah.
There's a lot to learn about
Whoa.
that you probably hadn't had exposure to either in
Not
some
at
of these
all.
cases, right?
Not at all. I didn't know what I was doing. It's just, and if it wasn't for Mary Masher and Cindy Winkler and a couple of folk that, pulled me in, I wouldn't have known. And they even helped pick my first clerk for me. And they picked somebody who knew what they were doing, so they guided
That's
me.
that's so smart. Yeah.
Oh,
That's so
man,
smart.
I was so happy. In
Yeah.
fact, we're still together now. He works for me at Creative Visions.
Yeah.
He's in Denver, but, he's there. But if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I would have been on the floor and been able to accomplish
It's a
what I
lot
did.
to absorb for sure. But you did. You did it. What are some of the things that you're most proud of accomplishing when you were in that seat?
One is being able to work across the aisle and to build friendships, and I was able to do that. The other thing was to get with Stephen. I'm trying to think of his last name, but he was the president of our state. And
Leith.
Leith, yeah, Stephen Leith. And we met in the leader's office and we talked about kids going to school and giving them hope. And we developed a program called For You Promise, Our State For You Promise, where our state adopted 2 of the middle schools in my district, elementary schools in my district, Moulton and King. And those kids went through the program all the way. Once they graduated from high school, they got a full ride scholarship to our state, And right now, I think they're going to close the program because lack of funding. But up to this point, there's almost 30 young people that some are still in college, but have graduated now from our state.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Lives changed.
Life changed. Kids that never thought they were going to school.
Really, generations changed.
Exactly. And I love that.
Yeah.
I still step back, especially when you're in the mall or you go to a grocery store and a parent and a child come up to you, who are a child now, young adult, and say thank you. And you're saying, thank you, but why? And they said, we went through For You Promise.
Oh, yeah.
And, you just, a warmth just comes to you.
There are so many people that love and respect you in this community and that you have close relationships with. What do you hope they will carry forward from your example?
I posted this morning about us loving each other, us reaching out with each other. And I have a saying that if we understand our differences, then our similarities have substance. Don't be scared of the differences. And I want individuals to understand differences. That don't mean we have to believe or agree, but understand them. And that's what I'm hoping folk carry on.
That's great.
And even after I leave here, I hope people say, we got to understand the differences because all my life, in my experiences, I was the different. And I had to explain where I was coming from, especially in the House of Representatives. I had to let them know, yes, I am Muslim, and I have my prayer rug, and I would break and I would pray 5 times a day. I wore my kufi and that type of thing. And I knew headway was being made when a good friend of mine who's Republican, who sat across from me, came to me and said, can I use your prayer rug during Lent? Because I want to pray, And, I said, that's a start.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a start.
As I'm sitting here reflecting back on what that middle school teacher told you, when you think about that Akeo in middle school, if you were to give him advice at that point in time that others might be able to soak in now, what would have you told him about the legacy that he'd create?
Not to give or push your values on children. If I could turn back the hands of time, that's what I would tell him. Don't push your values on me. Now, you may believe it, that's no problem, but don't push them on me. you know, give me an opportunity.
Give me an
You know,
opportunity.
let me
Don't
do
close
that.
the window.
Don't close the door before I even get to the door.
No.
You know, give me an opportunity to do that. Let me open the door, you know.
I think about don't let anyone else hold the pen to your story. You didn't let anyone else hold the pen to your story, okay?
Exactly.
You wrote your story.
I wrote my own.
And I'm glad your mom was there as a co-author.
Yeah. But the funny part is my mother, short, real thing, you know, everything. I didn't find out till years later that she actually went up and dealt with that counselor.
I kind of wondered that in the back of my head, if there wasn't I'm going to slap you going on with the middle school.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been a fly in the corner, seeing my mother deal with this
That doesn't surprise me. I was curious about that.
Because I can see my mother now, you know.
Yeah.
Because I was her baby.
That's a great story. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
But that's what was important. And I tell anyone, don't underestimate your experiences. Don't underestimate your trials and tribulations. You know,
and what they can do in your formation.
Exactly. Because if I had to listen to that counselor, I never would have published my first book, never would have been a representative, never would have been on the school board, never would have found a creative vision, never would have produced TV shows. I had 2 TV shows I produced. So I never would have had any of that experience.
If you believed that.
If I was sitting at Armstrong Tire and Rubber.
My goodness. Yeah. Okay, Abdul-Samad, thank you for sharing your story with us on Legacy Leavers. I look at our Better Together sign, and you are actually such a living picture of that. Thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you. Again, it's an honor being here, and I thank you for inviting me.
Legacy Leavers is produced by the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines. For over 55 years, the Community Foundation has improved quality of life for all by promoting charitable giving, connecting donors with causes they care about, and providing leadership on important community issues. We're simply better together. Learn more at DesMoinesFoundation.org.